Today we're talking about an item you should be able to find extremely cheap, quite often all over the place, that will sell all of the time. It sells for good money. Hey, it's Don. Today we're going to look at an item here that's really easy to sell. It's something I run into all the time. It's something that most people do not think has a huge value to it. Today we're going to look at some coloring books that will go for some buku bucks. I've been selling coloring books for pretty much, over 25 years. They don't have to be old to be valuable either. Now with coloring books, some of the topics most people would assume wouldn't be very valuable will carry some decent value. This is food fighters here, and basically what it is characters, pancakes, pizza, machine guns, and things like that. It's just an odd, bizarre item made by a major book publisher, Golden. Most people, though, wouldn't assume something like this carries that kind of value. It's fairly new, 1989, over $200 for this one. Now, vintage cartoon characters are hot, high collectible items, as are TV-related ones, movie ones going back as far as you can find them. This is Snagglepuss here. They do extremely well. Most all of the Hanna-Barbera character ones will do well. Now, the number one question I always get asked when I talk about coloring books is what happens if they're colored inside of them. For a price example here, you might be able to sell a non-colored version of some coloring books for over $200, while a colored-in version you may only get 30 or 40 bucks for, if you're even lucky. Coloring in them actually does affect it drastically. Now, if it's just a page or two, you can still get okay money for them, but it will be nowhere near what they sell for without being colored in. You want them NOS, basically, unused, just sitting there. They do turn up like that quite often. I've even gotten them at thrift stores in big bulk quantity before. I've bought them at estate sales, garage sales, church sales. Giant flea markets are awesome for these. Sometimes I've picked up stacks of like 40 and 50 vintage coloring books. People collected them back then. They bought them for their kids. Sometimes they were just never used. You'll see them exactly that way. Now this one sold for around 150 bucks here, so there is some big value in the comic book related ones. Now a lot of the toy lines had TV shows as well as coloring books, all tied in together. This is Dino Riders. It's not a super old toy either. The toys themselves are worth some money, but this coloring book here sold for 173 bucks. Now one thing too with a lot of these, they're not collected obviously to color. Most of the people buying the vintage ones are adult buyers looking to have them on a wall or for a display purpose or to have something from a character that they collect. Groovy Ghoulies is one of those oddball ones. Wasn't on TV very long, I think a couple of years. It was a cartoon series if I'm not mistaken. This one sold for roughly 150 bucks for this one here. Now here's one I've run into quite a few times. This one is out there. There's quite a few of these made. This is an original TSR Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. Now this one is not a standard size. This one's fairly large. That is why this one's missed. The last one I found in a group of calendars. It's big. It's more along the lines of a large-sized calendar. Usually these go for 75 to 95 bucks in decent condition. This one's a nice copy here, basically 150 bucks as well. Now here's Tennessee Tuxedo, another cartoon character. All these 50s and 60s characters go extremely well. These will usually sell more than comic books too from the same time frame, even if they have similar or identical cover artwork to them. This one went for 125 bucks. Now here's a Terry Toons coloring book with Deputy Dog. Now Deputy Dog, I personally remember, that was one of my first comic books, I think, at the age of 5 or 6. So I do remember these characters. 110 bucks on this one here. Again, you want them where they haven't been colored in, and if they have been colored in, you want them where it actually stays in the lines and looks nice. 80s are hot in most items, and that goes with coloring books as well. Masters of the Universe, the action figure line, cartoon series, the whole works. All of these sorts, any of the cartoon or movie-related ones from the 80s do extremely well. 70s, 60s, going back as far. Star Wars coloring books, Battlestar Galactica. Believe it or not, I've seen an Alien coloring book as well. Odd subject or not, they still sell extremely well. Things like this I'll have up for maybe a couple of days, if that. If it's a bin, buy it now, I'll sell it right away. Now, Hanna-Barbera cartoon character coloring books sell extremely well. It's probably one of the biggest areas that I actually run into when I'm out and about sourcing. I will see Hanna-Barbera ones far more often than pretty much anything else. Obviously, I'd love to run into some 1960s Marvel comics or 60s, 70s DC coloring books, but they're not that prevalent anymore. If you run into them even colored in, some of those can still go for some big buku bucks. And this example here is sold for almost 90 bucks. Now here's an earlier one from Roy Rogers and Dale Evans. Now one thing you'll notice in the 50s and before, a large number of the coloring books were very, very thick. They had many, many pages compared to any of the modern ones. I've seen some with 128 coloring pages, and it's a pretty fair, thick book here, half an inch or so. It's kind of like a giant-sized comic book, so to speak. I personally like and do extremely well with the painted covers of any kind. Similar to this one here. It reminds me of the Dell 4-color comic series, the painted covers, Tom Corbett or any of that kind of stuff. Now space, sci-fi, horror, and comic book are the top ones, but vintage Western of some of the major stars like this one here will sell for some good money. This one went for $89. Now in '69, when Hot Wheels was pushing new lines and things like that out, they issued a lot of other things like coloring books for tie-ins. So a child could get the car, a coloring book, a t-shirt, or anything along that line all at the same time. Cross-category interests and things like that go for these as well. 80 bucks for these two right here. Now one other thing to consider, look at the cover price on these. The lower the price, usually the older they are, and usually the higher price they can sell for. Now, most of the earlier ones are 10, 5 cents, somewhere in that range. 25 cents, 59 cents, 79 cents. Usually any of the ones less than $1 are the ones that will sell for some decent money. 80s and before. But as I've shown you, there are some that will go that are newer also. Now here's Thundar the Barbarian. I do remember that as a child, the cartoon series as well. Now this one sold for $71. Now believe it or not, there are still some vintage coloring books sitting in some clearance places, marked down in bulk places that auction stuff off. So I have personally bought lots of coloring books. Maybe it's all the same one, but that's not really a concern for me if it's something that I think I can sell. You can sell these on Amazon, Etsy, eBay, pretty much anywhere as well, and they'll still sell for some decent money. Now even secondary characters, ones that you may not recognize, can still sell extremely well because usually they made less of the secondary characters than they did the main characters. This is from the Mighty Hercules cartoon series from the early 60s. This is Newt and Toot. Obviously, they're mythological characters tied along with Hercules. This one went for $74.99. Lowe is another one of those companies that made a ton of this sort of material. I've seen Superman, pretty much any comic book or cartoon character you can imagine Lowe made a coloring book for. Now, coloring books as well can go back to the very early 1900s. And this is from 1932 for Flip the Frog. This one sold for over $200. An early comic character here, as you can see. They are highly sought after. Most all of the ones from the 20s, 30s, 40s will get you some good bucks. Now, besides standardized coloring books, there are some other ones where you can recolor, you can wipe off. Now, basically, these are like dry eraser boards, and this is a Three Stooges one here. So you'd be able to wipe it off with a clean paper towel or something like that, and you could recolor it as well. So there's other things that are tied in and still go along with coloring books. Any of these sorts of things do extremely well also. Now tie-ins especially, like the Three Stooges here. This one went for almost 90 bucks. And one last area tied along with coloring books are painting books. Now many of the painting books, you just have to get some of the spots wet and the color is actually embedded into the paper. So once it's wet, you'll be able to see the color. They did them for all sorts of topics across the board. Many of the earlier ones were these paint as well. Crayons were expensive still at this point also, so paint was already printed on some of the paper, or you'd have to buy your own. This is for the Boy Scouts here, and this one went for 165 bucks. I am always on the lookout for coloring books of any type whatsoever. New ones, old ones, it doesn't really matter. You'd be surprised, even ones that were made 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago are still able to be sold for 30, 40, 50 bucks, even into the hundreds as well. But anyway, that's what I have for you today. Well, there we go. Hopefully that gave you some ideas, some thoughts. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button down below. You can also hit the bell icon to be notified if I post new content or go live. Subscribe and tell all your friends.
Meet beautiful Amy, the new doll with high fashion hair you can brush and style and wash. Amy has her own styling booklet. And with her tumbling, flowing hair, you can create spectacular high fashion hairdos.
You look super, Amy.
Amy's accessory wig box with hairpieces and jewelry give you many glamorous ways to style Amy.
Perfect.
Amy with hairpiece jewelry, styling brush and booklet, accessory wig box sold separately.